Okay. Wow. Good. Yes. Oh, I love you too, you know it. Wasn't that really good lunch, by the way? Let's give it up to Lisa. That was delicious. And if you had any thoughts about taking that green stuff home or the gumbo, I'm sorry, I'm first. I'm taking all the leftovers. And I also just want to thank Jenny and Gio for worship. Can you believe how spirit-led that was? They don't have anything, and yet that was just fantastic. I've known them for several years, and they're just phenomenal. Always got to edify the women, right? We do so much. Well, my name is Sarah Frank, and I want to thank CWC for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all here. I actually preached in this church for like 4 weeks last year, so this feels like home. So I'm kind of excited to be back here.
It's awesome.
That's when I would tell her you can't spell awesome without me, but that might sound bad. All right, have any of you purchased a house? Anybody in here bought a house? Okay, good. All right, so my husband and I are finally in the process of doing this, and oh my goodness, you guys, it is exhausting. Not just mentally, but emotionally. We started this process at the end of March, and as we were looking at houses online through our realtor's website, we hit our very first speed bump. That being my husband's work history. He is a contractor, and so most financial institutions need 2 consistent years of 1099s. And well, by March, we were at 15 months. And our bank, of course, said no, and I thought life was over. I went, great, maybe we should just rent a house, because we're living in my parents' basement, guys. We're outgrowing the space. We need to move. And our real estate agent, he knows a few brokers, and he said, hey, we can work with them, let's see what we can do. And the one broker we've been working with, he pre-approved us, and so we began to look for houses. We finally found one that we liked, and it was almost by accident. We were not expected to be there, it just happened. And we loved it so much that we were like, okay, let's put an offer in. It was a little more than we wanted to spend, but it was move-in ready, so we were willing to compromise. And that was when we found out that while we were pre-approved, the entire approval process wasn't finalized yet. So another speed bump. And we're just waiting and waiting, and if you're anything like me, you're wondering, well, why the heck were you showing me houses if the final approval hadn't come in? Like, it seemed a bit silly that we would be doing all of that, getting our hopes up, because of course, it killed the momentum. And we had to sit for another 2.5 weeks, hoping and praying nobody would take this house. Well, then last week, actually, let me backtrack because I don't want to mess up the timeline here. When we finally got approved, we went to put an offer on this house. We found out that they were only accepting cash offers. And I was like, really? But they were accepting other offers, but they wouldn't accept it until April 25th, which was yesterday, right? Okay, remember that. So in the meantime, we know we've got this approval. We're just going to keep looking because maybe God has a better plan. We saw this house on Enchanted, and I've always loved that street name. It's got that princess feel to it, right? It always captivated me when I would drive by it, and the neighborhood is very well established. I really don't want to live somewhere where a gas station could just pop up like that. That's not what I want. And I dipped out of work the next day. I was like, I need to go see this. I'm not taking any chances. And when we walked in, guys, we fell in love with it. It was everything we wanted. I was like, yes, let's do it. And normally I like to sleep on a house, not literally, but like, just to be clear. But I was ready. It had everything. And we offered 12 over what they were asking because we wanted to show, look, we're serious. Okay, like we want this. And that was last Friday night. Saturday morning, I was at Jazzercise because I'm an instructor, and I was subbing, and I was telling the class how excited I was. Like this, we've got it. Our realtor felt great about it. I got home, and we were beat by a cash offer, and I was devastated, to say the least. And what's the typical response when we don't get what we want? We kind of rebound, right? So we fell in love with this one house. And then Saturday we decide let's go look at more, because why not? The first house we went to, oh my goodness, it reeked of cigarette smoke. And I was like, no, cannot do that, right? And I actually made the joke to our realtor that I would rather buy a house that had cat urine because I know how to get rid of that better than I do cigarette smoke because I'm a cat lady. The next house we went to, guess what it smelled like? Cat urine. I walked right in and went, oh no, like I didn't mean to speak it into existence. It was obviously already there. Oh my gosh, and our realtor's like, guys, I'm so sorry. And he actually had his baby with him because we did this so last minute. And I apologized to him. I said, your poor daughter, oh my gosh. First I take her to a cigarette house, then I take her to a cat urine house. Like, we gotta get her out of here. And it was just bad. And then later that afternoon, we saw another house, which was great until you go into the backyard and it's straight back and then a slope down. What's interesting about the slope is that there's a church right there. And I said to our realtor, I want people to meet Jesus, but I don't want them to meet them that way. You know, like kid's gonna hit a fence, right? You're thinking my kid's gonna have parties, it's not gonna work out very well. All of these were very hard no's. So I spent that entire weekend miserable, but in deep conversation with God, because I couldn't understand, like, what was the point? I just couldn't understand why God did this. For weeks, I was telling God that I trusted him, that I wanted a house that would align with his will. But then when the situation didn't work the way I wanted it to, I didn't get angry. I just kept talking to God. I prayed all kinds of different prayers, like, God, please let that cash offer fall through, right? Like, let's go back to the enchanted house. The question of why did this happen? What was the point of us seeing that house if you were just going to take it away? So many prayers were prayed. There was also a bunch of emotional eating because I was just upset, as you can imagine. And by Sunday, I felt even worse. So I didn't really get to enjoy Easter the way that I should, because my mind kept going back to that house on Enchanted. And actually, if you think about it, it really was an enchantment. It was like this thing that was there, but it was fake, and it wasn't even real for us. And as I sat in church listening to the Easter sermon, this was a sermon I've never heard before. There's the traditional Easter one where you get kind of the same message, and this was totally different. Our pastor was talking about how when Mary went to the tomb, she mistook Jesus as the gardener. And he pointed out how God has always been in the gardening business. He was the gardener at the beginning. Obviously, we messed that up, right? But here's God again in the garden, creating new life for us out from the ground. And that's when I started to think about the ground, literally the ground. And I thought about how when we plant something, it starts with the ground. And only when something is ready to bloom does it exit the ground. Having a foundation is a requirement for anything to grow. You see, the theme, as Benita shared for this event, it's blossoming in the presence of the Lord. And I'll be honest, I've preached on this quite a few times. And I didn't really want to put the same thing together. So I really kind of struggled to find something. And as the clock was ticking this week, my mother will tell you, like last night, it finally hit me and I was running through this whole thing. I started to think about what blossoming looks like at the ground level when you're right in the dirt, the beginning of everything. So while I could talk about what it's like to bloom and be this beautiful flower or a magnificent tree, the Holy Spirit spoke into my heart the need of blossoming in the presence of the Lord when we want something so bad and are waiting for it to happen. Because ladies, there is an opportunity for us to bear fruit as we build a strong biblical foundation while we walk with God. And this is all while we're a little seed in the ground. Now you're probably expecting me to go right into the sower and the seed. We're not going to go there. The passage that actually came to mind because of what we've been going through is actually from the book of Matthew. So I don't know if you guys have your, what I like to call Bibbles. That's what the kids used to call them, Bibbles, Bibles. If you would turn with me to Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 to 27. And it reads, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house. And yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house. And it fell, and its collapse was great. Now, this is when Jesus is he's talking to a large crowd of people. He had started with his disciples, but it magnified, and as we know, that's the Sermon on the Mount chapters, Matthew 5 through 7. But before I go any further, I just want to address the fact that you might think it's really weird that I'm going to this piece of scripture. First of all, you guys know I'm weird, so nothing is ever going to be normal when I step up here. But more importantly, I just ask that you hear me out as I walk you through the way that God brought this into fruition in my mind the last few days. So again, Matthew 5 through 7 is known as the chapters with the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is speaking again to his disciples, a large crowd, and he's covering a wide range of topics. There's a mixture of descriptive as well as prescriptive things for us as believers to take heed of. And at the end, the very end, we're encouraged to build a solid foundation. So where does this foundation start? It starts at the beginning. It's at the bottom. It's in the ground. When we accept Christ into our hearts, that's when the process of sanctification begins. God begins working in our lives, and let's be honest, it's not easy. There are roots that we must get rid of, because if we don't, we end up becoming our own worst enemy. Now, thankfully, God works in a progressive manner, so it's not just going to be all this stuff at one time. But sometimes the way that he does things doesn't meet our expectations. And the question that I have is, do we ever stop and wonder if the expectations we have are from leftover roots that we need to get rid of? Probably not, and that's why we must trust the process that God has, and we must surrender to his will. So, do you guys know what the process is to build a house? Have you ever looked into it? Yeah? Okay, good. So you know it's a lengthy process. I'm going to walk you through it. Not the whole thing, though. We're not going to be here all day. So, you need proper foundations. That's where it starts. You've got the process of finding the right piece of land and going through all the legal county channels, everything to get approval before you could even start. Once this is done, that's when the excavators and bulldozers come in. They show up to clear the land of any debris, like trees, boulders, that kind of get rid of the hills, level it out, fill in holes, dips, hills, etc. They even dig deeper into the ground if the blueprint for the house has a basement, so they have to just go even further down. Now, keep in mind this isn't an easy job. There are big machines that were built to handle the intensity of the earth because we can't do it. In fact, as I was thinking about this, I flashed back to church camp when I had to dig a latrine. Has anybody done that? Isn't it hard? Oh my gosh, why don't they make the boys do that? Okay, anyway, so if we get exhausted digging a latrine, could you imagine digging a 6-foot grave? Thank God we have those machines. But when it comes to a house, they need that. From there, the footings are installed, the foundation gets poured, then comes installing drains, sewers, taps, and then inspections, which who knows how long that takes to go through. Oh, but wait, there's more. The frame of the house is built. Sheathing is applied to the exterior walls, followed by the installation of windows and exterior doors. So I'm sure you're realizing now, this is a process. It's a long process. It can be as little as 7 months or as much as 14 months. Now, those timelines can shorten, right? Somebody could leave a project behind and give up on it. It could go for years, depending on how much work or if they get delays. It's a process. And yet, to those who are building a house, they're not usually thinking about what's happening at that point. They're looking long term. They're looking into the future knowing that they're going to have a home that they love where they have safety and security. And again, it starts with the ground. When we realize that we need God, we've then found the perfect piece of land, which really, that piece of land, that's you. That's me. It's us. We are that beautiful piece of land that God wants to work with. And this is where God comes in to do his best. He comes in with his strength and power and begins to change our hearts day by day. He invites us to allow him to dig up the ugly roots from the life that we lived prior to him and begin turning toward him. Now, our world is incredibly fast-paced. We tend to want things right now, but maybe we're meant to be in the ground doing the trench work just a little bit longer. And maybe God is teaching me something about digging deeper into his presence than obsessing over every single house that pops up in my email, because let's be real, every day I'm looking, is there something new? In fact, today I've not looked, just for the record. I'm not planning to either. If you'd like to check in later, make sure I'm not, that'd be great too. It does become a problem. And you know what? For all I know, that enchanted house may have had a serious issue that God knew was going to crush us. And if you're wondering about that other house that we loved at the very, very beginning, they were accepting offers yesterday, but somebody had a cash offer on Wednesday. And again, I was heartbroken. But I'm not going to let it get to me the way it did last weekend. I spent more time in prayer focused on being connected with God, because realistically, that's the only hope I have in this life, and the hope that I have that he's going to give me a house, because he knows the concerns, he knows the fears. Guys, I've got that little, Isaac, he's 3 years old, running around. I don't want to put him in a bad situation. I have to think long term. In the parable of the house built on the sand and on the rock, Jesus, let's be real, he's not thinking about construction. He's not thinking about building codes or violating them for that matter. He's helping us build our life with him. He doesn't want us to just read the words. He wants us to act upon it. Faith and obedience are what we need, and the only way that we can accomplish this is by being in his presence as much as possible. The best place to do this is in the ground, where it's dark and you have no one to turn to but God. Do you want me to pick that up? No, just okay. That was creepy. Came right out of the ground. Okay. I guess it wanted to be grounded. Okay, I'll stop. I don't know about you, but when I'm stuck in a dark place that seems a bit creepy, the one thing I do is I latch onto God, right? Because we're meant to be the light in the darkness. And I want to take the time to find the right house, one that God has paved the way for, because he knows, again, my heart. He knows the things I'm concerned with. He knows the whole work situation my husband has, and we just need to be in the best place possible. This parable teaches us the importance of a solid spiritual foundation. More often than not, this is done in the ground with God until the time is right for us to grow and then to bloom. There's one last thought that I want to leave you guys with. When my husband and I got married, we went through premarital counseling, because if you want to survive, you kind of got to, talk through the hard things and get past it. And we disagreed on how long we wanted to wait to have a child. I wanted to wait a few years, and that was because I saw so many people get married and then rush into children, and they really didn't have a solid foundation in their marriage, right? They didn't have a relationship and be united before the child came into the picture, and as you can imagine, there's disruption across the board. My husband wanted to wait 1 year because I'm not getting older. And I mean, he's not wrong. I did rob the grave. My husband is quite a bit older than me. But I compromised, and I said, okay, fine. Do you know how long it took us to have Isaac? 6 years. So in a sense, I got what I wanted, and what's interesting is along the way, I became obsessive about it. I was watching everybody else get pregnant, and I'm like, what's happening? And to the point where when we did get pregnant, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a mistake. That's another story if you want to hear that. But right now, this is happening again. When we started looking at houses, I said to my husband that I wanted to move in July. I think July is a really good time. We just had 2 ducks at that point that we needed to get in line. And he said, no, I want to move out now. We need our own place. Isaac's getting bigger. And what did I do? I said, okay. And I followed my husband's lead. Now, what that led to, of course, is more brokenheartedness, right? Not understanding what's been happening. And now this is not to say that my husband was wrong or that he shouldn't lead, because he is the head of my household, and I love and respect my husband, so please do not misunderstand me when I say that. But when I followed my husband's lead in these scenarios, every time God said, stop, you need to calm down, And instead, he's now blessed 2 other families with really great homes, which I'm very happy for them. Still hurt, don't get me wrong, but our time is coming. What I am saying here is that God's timing for us to bloom is different from the timeline that we have. So instead of me being on my husband's timeline of things, I need to be on God's timeline of things. And I need to continue to be in his presence and trust him, because if I don't, we will jump and I will not be exercising wisdom and discernment. So a lot of times, a spouse is one's more excited than the other and vice versa. It's good to have that level-headedness, and that's really what we need, because we're talking about like 6-figure houses, guys. Like that's scary. Just gonna put that out there compared to what you guys probably bought a house for, like what, $100? No. It's a lot of money, right? It's a very big decision. I'll go stand in the corner later. So something to think about is that when we're waiting for something to happen or something to change, it can be incredibly agonizing. And there are 2 songs that a friend shared with me that really kind of help pull this together, and it's ironic. I think we did this downstairs. Psalm 37:7. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not get upset because of the one who is successful in his way, because of the person who carries out wicked schemes. That's not to say that whoever got those houses were up to no good. But, I wanted to think that, because, as humans, we want to have that control and all the things, but I couldn't get upset. I had to keep resting in him. I had to sit under the wings of the Almighty, as Psalm 91 says, and just wait. And then also Psalm 27:14, wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Yes, wait for the Lord. Something I want you to remember is that the disciples spent a couple of days mourning Jesus after his death. They thought it was the end, and it was only the beginning. Jesus rose out of the ground, and with him came new life. And as for me, I guess I'm staying in the ground. I need to continue to abide in the presence of God, because if I don't abide in him, he will not abide in me and dwell. And John 15 tells us that. The other part I know is that as long as I love God and I live according to his will, he will work together everything for my good, and not even just me, for my family. And that's the example that I want to keep setting for my family. And don't worry, when we do buy a house, we will have the mother of all housewarming parties, and you'll all be invited. I am not expecting gifts. I just want to celebrate, because I know by that point, it will have been the house that God prepared for us, not something that I chose or my husband chose to push. The last thing I want to leave you, I know I am done, but I do have an action step for you, ladies. A lot of times we can struggle with being in the presence of God. We may not understand what that is. There is a book by Brother Townsend and Brother Lawrence called Practicing His Presence. I would highly encourage you to go check it out. Your library may have it, or you can get it on Amazon. It's a very short read, but it's 2 men separated by 200 years, both striving to be in the presence of God, where they're continually seeking God in everything they do. So you know how you can start your day in prayer, and then you lose track of God, and you're like, what happened? Where did my day go? These men were so intentional, and they thought, everything I did, okay, God, please help me to brush my teeth for 2 minutes, because this is forever long. Okay, dear God, please help me with this. Please help me, okay, God, what should I do here? What should I do there? With everything they approached. And that's a really hard thing for us, because as humans, we're sinful. We're not attuned to God. It's kind of like when Paul tells us to put on the armor of God. It's because we have to physically and intentionally put on that armor of God. So that being said, I would encourage you to check out that book. I own it. I'm happy to lend it out, but I did write all over it, so it's a little messy. But can you say okay? Somebody. Anyway, that's all I have for you this afternoon. So I want to thank you, and continue to bloom wherever you are. If you're in the ground, welcome to the party. I'm happy to have you.